One of the components of my OCD stems from the fact that when I obsess on something, it has to be done perfectly. There is zero margin, zero tolerance for any area. And in my life, that's represented mostly by my computer work. Since I do have a computer science and electrical engineering background, I do tend to spend a lot of time on my computer. In fact, I spend so much time on my computer that it pretty much consumes 95% of my life. Up to this point, for example, it's now March, since the beginning of January, I've been spending all day and practically all night on the computer. The interesting thing to note is I haven't actually accomplished anything on the computer. Let me put this as an analogy. Imagine you're an author writing a book, and you're a perfectionist. You're afflicted with OCD like myself. And you're writing this book, and at some point during the book, you realize that you've made a punctuation error or spelling error. And you start focusing on that, and that leads you to believe that you may have made other spelling and punctuation errors throughout the book. So rather than go through the book and search for those errors, you decide to just wipe out the entire book and start from scratch. So you start writing the book again from scratch, and again at some point through the book you have this idea that there's some type of error, some type of grammatical error that you just can't go back and fix, because somehow that specific error somehow contaminates the entire book and it has a ripple effect. That error may have produced another error, may have produced another error, and another error, and so on. So the only way to remedy that is to wipe out the entire book and start all over. So of course you spend all your time writing the book, but you never actually finish the book. And that's the problem. Also, another analogy is someone that's really into cars, into auto mechanics. They spend all their time working on the engine, fine-tuning the engine, putting the transmission, optimizing the entire engine system. And that's all they want to do, is get that system running perfectly. And if at some point during the reconstruction phase of the engine, they might have an idea that they forgot a screw, or they forgot to tighten something, or they forgot to oil something. So now all of a sudden the entire system is contaminated. They have to break down the entire car and rebuild it from scratch and start all over again. And of course, at some point before completion, they'll either find an actual defect or a perceived defect, in which the only way to correct it so that the end result is perfection is to break down the entire car and start building it all over again from scratch. Now, of course, the problem is they spend all of their time building the car, but they never actually get to drive it. And therein lies the problem of the OCD component that I have of perfectionism, is that I'm almost afraid to use the computer unless I know it's been perfected, highly optimized, and extremely perfected. The slightest perceived error in the computer, whether my icons aren't lined up properly or the colors aren't perfect, is impossible to correct. The only way to correct it is to wipe out the entire system and start all over with it, because in my mind, by making a small correction, somehow has a ripple down effect that affects everything below it. The computer is no longer perfect, the system's contaminated, and it must be built up from scratch. So I've spent the past 3 months working on my computer, but not enjoying it, and not actually getting anything done on the computer. So between time on the computer and obsessions about 93 steps of showering, pretty much consumes my life. It takes a tremendous amount of brain power, especially for the computer now. I had mentioned earlier that one of the benefits of OCD is that eventually, at some point, I will be satisfied that the computer is up to my standards, or the mechanic would have built his car and reached a point where he says, yes, it's up to his standards. Now, at that point, the result is a superior product, a computer that is of superior design and specifications, a car that is of perfect specifications and calibrations, or a novel that is perfectly created. So that's the positive side, is that you tend to produce perfect results of whatever project you're working on. Of course, the unfortunate thing is it takes forever. You know, an ordinary person would get on the computer and start using it, and that's the end of the story. Someone like myself, I won't use the computer until I know it's perfected. And therein lies one of the major problems. I think I've covered just about everything. The only thing left is my need for consistency and calibration, and that I'll demonstrate using some of the electronic treadmills upstairs.